In today's podcast, I'm talking to the neurotypical wives out there who may be suffering from Cassandra syndrome, and we're going to look at why your autistic husband changed. I want to help you to understand shifting support needs in your neurodiverse marriage. Have you ever found yourself looking at your ASD husband and wondering, where did the man I married go? Maybe when you first met, he seemed attentive, engaged, he was interested, capable, perhaps he held a demanding job. He managed household responsibilities, participated in family activities. You were his special interest. But somewhere along the way, things changed. Now he seems more withdrawn, less emotionally available, more rigid, overwhelmed, or he seems incapable of handling things that once appeared easy. And if you're like many neurotypical wives experiencing Cassandra syndrome, you've probably asked yourself a very painful question. Was our marriage a lie? Did he stop loving me? Why is he trying less now than he used to? So today, I want to explore a possibility that may completely change how you understand what's happening. What if your husband didn't stop caring? What if he never stopped loving you? What if his nervous system simply stopped being able to compensate the way it once did? Let's look at the great misunderstanding. One of the biggest misconceptions about autism is the idea that functioning levels are fixed. Many neurotypical wives tell me, well, when I met him, he seemed fine. He functioned perfectly. He was successful. He was social. He was funny. He was normal. And that creates a tremendous amount of confusion later. Because if someone appeared capable 10 years ago, but struggles today, it's easy to conclude that they have changed. But what many neurotypical wives don't realize is that they were seeing years of masking, years of pushing beyond neurological limits, years of managing life through extraordinary effort. And eventually, that effort becomes difficult to sustain. Now you add marriage to the equation. Marriage adds complexity. One of the hidden realities of neurodiverse marriage is that relationships themselves require enormous neurological resources. Most neurotypical wives naturally think about marriage emotionally. There's connection, conversation, shared experience, mutual understanding. But for many autistic husbands, marriage also creates ongoing demands for social processing. For example, reading emotional cues, navigating expectations, managing conflict, responding to changing needs, balancing multiple perspectives. So what feels natural to a neurotypical wife often requires active cognitive effort for an autistic husband. Now, that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. It means that his brain may be working much harder than you realize. Then children enter the picture. This is where many wives tell me things began to fall apart. The husband who seemed relatively functional suddenly appears overwhelmed. The husband that once had energy for a relationship becomes distant. The husband who seemed capable now appears exhausted. And understandably, many wives interpret that as abandonment. But think about what parenthood introduces. Sleep deprivation, noise, chaos, constant interruptions, changing schedules, increased financial pressure, increased emotional demands. The autistic nervous system that was already working overtime suddenly finds itself carrying more than it can sustain. What often looks like indifference is actually overload. Unfortunately, overload and indifference can look remarkably similar from the outside. Both involve withdrawal. Both involve reduced engagement. Both create loneliness. And that's why so many wives end up feeling emotionally abandoned. Now let's talk about why Cassandra syndrome often intensifies over time. One of the most painful aspects of Cassandra syndrome is that many wives feel increasingly invisible as the years go by. The more overwhelmed their autistic husband becomes, the less emotional connection seems available. The less emotional connection available, the harder the wife works. The harder she works, the more exhausted she becomes. Eventually, she feels like she's carrying the emotional weight of the entire marriage. And then many wives begin thinking, well, if he loved me, he would try harder. But what if the issue isn't effort? What if the issue is capacity? That's a very different conversation, and it's one that can reduce enormous amounts of resentment. Now let's talk about the midlife shift nobody else talks about. Many neurodiverse marriages experience another major transition during midlife. This often surprises neurotypical wives because they expect maturity to make things easier. Instead, they may see that their autistic husband becomes more rigid, more sensory sensitive, more withdrawn, more dependent on routines, easily overwhelmed. What's happening? Many autistic adults report that masking becomes increasingly difficult during midlife. The strategies that once helped them compensate begin requiring more energy than they can provide. And in some cases, They're not becoming less capable. They're becoming less able to hide their limitations. That distinction matters because one interpretation creates blame. The other creates understanding. Let's talk about what this means for you. I want to be very clear here. Understanding neurological overload doesn't mean excusing hurtful behavior. It doesn't mean accepting emotional neglect, and it doesn't mean abandoning your own needs. Your loneliness matters, your exhaustion matters, your emotional deprivation matters. The goal is not to invalidate your experience. The goal is to understand what actually may be happening. Because when you understand the source of a problem, you gain the ability to respond differently. Instead of constantly asking, well, why doesn't he care anymore? You begin asking, what's overwhelming his nervous system right now? That question often leads to much more productive conversations. Now let's talk about the relationship trap many couples fall into. Here's what I see happen repeatedly. The wife interprets overload as rejection. The ASD husband experiences increasing demands and becomes more overwhelmed. The wife pursues more connection. The husband withdraws further. The wife feels abandoned. The husband feels criticized. Both partners become trapped. Neither feels understood, and the cycle continues for years and decades. Breaking that cycle requires both partners to understand that neurological capacity fluctuates. It's not fixed. It changes with stress. It changes with age. It changes with health. It changes with life circumstances. So now let's look about a new way to think about the future. Perhaps one of the most healing ideas for wives experiencing Cassandra syndrome is this. What you're witnessing is not a husband who loves you less. What you're witnessing is a nervous system carrying more than it can currently handle. That doesn't erase your pain, I understand that. But it may change the story you tell yourself about the pain. And sometimes that change in perspective creates space for new solutions, not because the challenges disappear, but because blame begins giving way to understanding. Now, if you're experiencing Cassandra syndrome, I want you to remember something important. You're not imagining your loneliness. You're not imagining your frustration. You're not imagining the emotional disconnect. Those experiences are real. But the explanation may be more complicated than he stopped caring. Many autistic husbands experience significant shifts in capacity throughout marriage, parenthood, midlife, and aging. Understanding those shifts doesn't solve every problem, but it can help you stop personalizing every change. And that alone can be profoundly healing. Because sometimes the question isn't, why doesn't he love me enough? Sometimes the better question is, what has life required of his nervous system that neither of us fully understood? That question opens doors that blame never can. Now, if this resonated with your experience, share in the comments. When did you first notice a significant shift in your husband's capacity or engagement? Please comment. I will read and respond to your comment. Also, like and subscribe. You're not alone in this journey. I'll see you again tomorrow. Hey guys, this is Mark. Some of you may not know that I have a lot of books on Amazon. So if you like my videos, you'll like my books. I have several for ASD spouses, for NT spouses, and for the neurodiverse couple. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this link. Feel free to click on that link and see what's available. I'm sure you'll find something that applies to you. So if you're struggling in your neurodiverse marriage, help is available, one click away.